I am Piyush Gayan from Janapur University. I am a research scholar in the Department of School of Language and Linguistics. Now I am presenting our paper, the Disambiguating Speech Alternation from the Viewpoint of Neuropragmatics, a study in Bengali language. So before going to understanding the speech alternation, we have to discuss on speech perception. So what do we actually mean by speech perception? Speech perception is a process by which the sounds of language are heard, interpreted and understood. And speech perception is the perceptual analysis of the auditory input. So the speech perception is actually interrelated to the other aspects, other linguistic aspects such as acoustics, phonological features, lexical semantics, and also in the pragmatics. So in the layer of pragmatics, the speech perceptions are integratedly related to the speech act. So why it is related? In communication through spoken language entails a continuous encoding and decoding of meaning, intention, and emotions. So a successful communication presupposes that the recognition of intention appropriately by the hearer. So the intention must be appropriately recognized by the hearer. So the speech act theory illustrates these functional aspects of linguistic utterance, and according to the speech act theory, this is the act is determined by the action performance during its articulation. So these actions are linguistically encoded, and specific language such as Bengali, English, German, any kind of language, specific language has the specific morphemes or prosody or intonation and the sentence structures to indicate a particular type of act like question, request, assertion, etc. So therefore, speech perception entails perception of a particular act. An auditory input such as an utterance is unambiguously recognized by the hearer implies that the intention of the speaker and the hearer recognized by the hearer implies that the intention of the speaker and the illocutionary force of the utterance is must be understood and recognized by the hearer. So here, where the perception is our point of discussion, the cognitive approaches or cognitive neuroscience approaches comes out because the perception itself is manifested in the brain, in the human brain, and this perception which is manifested in the brain is reflected through or in the neural activity, which corresponds to a specific speech act situations. There are so many levels of speech act analysis from phonological level like vowel and syllable perception or a single spoken word perception. Or there are so many paradigms to analyze from the neurocognitive approaches, but here we are dealing at the sentence level or utterance level perception from the in the approach from the cognitive neuroscience. So where the neural activity or the brain comes out, we before going to our research objective, now we'll briefly discuss on the neural activation. So our brain consists of thousands of neurons which are heavily interconnected. The neurons are typically consist of a cell body and more than one dendrites, which all ends with the synapses. The synapses act as a gateway of inhibitory and excitatory activity between the neurons. And in a situation when a group of neurons send some information to another group of neurons through electrical pulses, following a synchronized, here we are seeing the electrical pulses moving throughout the brain. So following a synchronized firing pattern, it can cause into an oscillation. So what we call the brain oscillation. And based on this, this oscillation of the neurons can be captured from the EEG EEG technique, and and measuring the electrical activity from the brain is useful because it reflects the different neurons in the brain network, how they communicate with each other via through these electrical impulses, and it is also a non-invasive technique to in the research field. These oscillations are generally classified according to their frequency ranges. Like we can classify it in the five different bands or frequency bands: delta band 1 to 4 hertz, theta band 4 to 8 hertz, alpha band 8 to 12 hertz, and beta band 13 to 25 hertz, and gamma band, the most highly band, is more than 25 hertz. Now we will discuss our objective, or the main part of the study is the ambiguity, and how we can disambiguate the speech alternations. So ambiguity is actually a very interesting thing, because there are so many many types of ambiguity. So now we focus on the pragmatic level ambiguity here, such as ambiguity in conversation, or where a communication is taking place. So consider an example. I borrowed it from Levinson's one of the Levinson's paper on speech and perception. I have a credit card. So this sentence or utterance, "I have a credit card," is potential of being used as a refusal, or as a pre-offer, or as simply as an answer. Like if the sentence alone, if I put it randomly, we cannot actually recognize the exact intention of the sentence. What it meant by saying "I have a credit card." It can be a just an answer of someone's question. Like if we put a prior context, like how I am asking someone that how will you going to pay for the ticket. So he is replying that "I have a credit card." So that means he will pay by his credit card. So this is simply an answer, where if I ask someone I don't have money, he is replying that "I have a credit card." So he is willing to help me. So this is I didn't ask him to pay for me, but he pre-offered me as by saying this same utterance. So this utterance is, or sentence is, ambiguous at the conversation or the communication level when the previous context is not present. So the process of disambiguation can be done by adding the context. But apart from this, we can do the disambiguation, process of disambiguation through the prosody or intonation or rhythm of speech of a particular utterance. So as we all know that every utterance has its own intonation pattern or rhythm of speech, and interestingly, the intention of the utterance is embedded in the intonation of that particular utterance. So ambiguity arises when a sentence is potential to carry more than one intention, like before. So, but the intonation of each utterance must be different. Such an intonation of ordering is different from the intonation of questioning, as well as requesting, and others. So the disambiguation of an utterance presupposes that the actually handles that the neural manifestation of the intention recognized from the speech perception. So here we experimented on the Bengali language. So here I put the data which we have used as the stimuli for the EEG experiment. Here in the request tag, "Khabarta niye jabe to," that means "please take the food." Please listen the sound.
Khabarta niye jabe to.
And next, if our target is the question, the same morphosynthetic element is available.
Khabarta niye jabe to.
This appears as a question. So if we listen the utterance, we can easily distinguish that they are not similar. So they can correspond. First one is corresponds to request, whereas where is implies that please take the food. So imagine a situation that I have prepared a food for my friend, and I am asking him or her to please take the food. I have prepared it for you. But in the next part, I didn't get any time or to prepare any food for my friend. But I am asking him to, will you take the food? So can you take the food, or do you have some meal outside? So there is a difference in between the speech utterances. So what happens if when we are uttered, the utterance, the auditory utterance maps to a particular speech act with its in intonation. So the utterance maps with a particular speech act, and at the very moment of auditory input, the oscillation in the neurons also behaves or maps the particular pattern maps to that particular speech act. So the on the one hand, the intonation or the utterance maps with the speech act, and speech act and the brain oscillation. We can from brain oscillation we can also recognize the speech act. So for this study, we have chosen the 8 electrodes from 4 different lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal lobe. As we all know that from the frontal lobe, the F3 and F4, P3 and P4 from the parietal lobe. The even numbers are represented as the right left hemisphere, and even number that F4, P4, O2 and T4 is represented is the right hemisphere, and F3, P3, O1 and T3 represents the left hemisphere. Methodologically saying that we have prepared the 60 critical utterances for 34 question and 34 requested. And the all utterances are 5 to 7 words long, and the average duration of there is 1300 milliseconds. We represented it in a pseudo randomized way with a distractor, so that the participants, so to avoid the priming of the participants, the stimuli were designed in the Psychopi software, and the EEG experiment was run on 10 Bengali native speakers who don't have any neurological disorder. Now come to the results and discussions. What we have obtained from the EEG result. So we have analyzed here the 3 frequency bands: theta wave, alpha wave, and beta wave. So now we will see first the theta wave oscillation in perception of request and question. In the frontal lobe, what we have found that the theta wave enhanced more in perception of question rather than request, while in the right frontal lobe it just goes opposite. In the left parietal lobe, the same pattern repeats as the left frontal lobe, where in the right parietal lobe, in processing of request, theta wave enhanced more than the question act. In case of occipital lobe, almost the similar pattern repeats, that in both the left and right hemisphere of the occipital lobe, that theta wave is higher in processing of request and theta wave is lower in processing of the question act. And in the temporal lobe, exactly the opposite scenario, we found that the theta wave increased in both the left and right temporal lobe in processing of question, whereas the theta wave in processing of request enhanced less than the question act. Next, we'll move to the alpha wave oscillation, where we have found very interesting insight for the alpha wave in processing of request and question. Look at this. In frontal lobe, alpha wave enhanced than question. Also in parietal lobe, but in right parietal lobe, it is drastic differences in between processing of request and question act. In also occipital lobe, the alpha wave is higher for request act processing, except in the temporal lobe. So frontal, parietal, and occipital lobe. In the frontal, parietal, and occipital lobe, alpha wave increased, highly increased in processing of request act, whereas there is a very insignificant difference in the temporal lobe. But in temporal lobe, alpha waves increased a little bit higher than request act perception. Again, and in the beta wave perception, we found in the frontal lobe that beta wave is higher in case of request act processing, and in parietal lobe, just the opposite. Beta wave is higher for request act processing in both the left and right parietal lobe, but right parietal lobe plays here also a vital role. In occipital lobe also, the beta wave is increased, enhanced more than the question act perception. And in temporal lobe, just the opposite, the beta wave increased or enhanced more than request act in perception of question. So what we get from these three plots, that in right parietal lobe, there is a sharp distinction in between in processing of request and question. The alpha, beta, and theta, the three frequency bands, sharply distinguished the request and question act in the right parietal lobe in the P4 electrodes, and the processing of request is the alpha, beta, and theta wave increased or enhanced highly and significantly high in case in comparison to the question act processing. So we also found a very interesting neural frequency pattern in perception of question. This neural pattern we have found for the question act perception, where exactly we have found another neural frequency pattern for the request act perception. So there is the difference, the different pattern we have found for the request and question act perception. From this, we can also see that the disambiguation is also reflected in the neural patterns which is manifested in our brain. So from the human response data, the request and question act also we have analyzed the reaction time. Almost the both acts took the similar time, but there is interesting another finding from the human response, that in case of question act perception, while our target stimuli is question, the participant responds more accurately when we asked for the our target utterance was request, because in Bengali or maybe in few many other languages, the question and request overlaps. Like a question can be interpreted as the indirect request. So participants are when our target stimuli is request act, they are confused with whether it is question or request. But in neural domain, it clears. So here is conclusion that disambiguation can be derived from the intonation of the utterance, not only by the context. And disambiguation entails the neural manifestation of the speech perception and intention. And enhanced alpha wave oscillation has been found in perception of request act, and the theta, alpha, and beta wave clearly distinguishes request and question act perception in the right parietal lobe. That's it. Thank you, sir.
Let me put one or two questions. It's really very interesting. Pragmatics, pragmatics is the meaning in the context, isn't it?
Yes.
But you have taken question and request within the linguistic context, maybe intonation differences. Have you tested this with the other kinds of context? Something, maybe your presentation is based on only request and question, okay?
Yes.
So this is okay. And how you are controlling the alpha, beta, that kind of ways when recording is done? Maybe I missed that part or so.
So we have actually in the EEG recording, after the EEG recording from the obtained data we have processed in MATLAB software. From there we got the frequencies corresponding to the each sentences.
Okay, maybe I have to still follow. There are certain, vast difference between the wavelength, isn't it? Alpha, beta.
Yes, it is a different frequency. Let me show you the.
Yes.
Brain oscillations can be classified in different frequency bands. Like we have in speech signal, we have different frequencies. And depending on the frequencies, we have the fluctuations and so many changes in the speech pattern. Like this, the brain also have the frequency patterns. So based on the frequency ranges, the oscillation can be divided into 5 different bands. The delta band.
That's okay, but when you play the recordings,
Yes.
do you adjust that or do you adjust that recording to the particular frequency?
No. All frequencies are there in case of speech perception.
Okay.
So we did not do anything manipulating. Just the EEG recording was done, and from the whole EEG we got the different signals, frequency ranges corresponding to the different utterances.
All right. Do you suggest any kind of clinical remedies through the studies or?
No, not clinical remedies, but it can be implemented in the computational methods for categorizing the speech and to recognize the speech, the intention of the speaker, intention and emotion of the speaker from these neural signals.
Right. Is there any other studies, relating pragmatics with the intonation or?
Yes. There are studies in, probably in Polish language or English to early speech. There are ERP studies also, even potential studies on early speech and recognition and the importance of the prior context. So the human brain recognizes the speech at early, before 100 milliseconds. The human being can understand what is coming in the next part of the utterance. But whether it is the prior context is available. So we omitted the prior context so that the role of intonation, we can understand the role of intonation.
All right. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.